I'm not the best storyteller, so bear with me. I was a college student female who lived right off campus in a duplex-type house. The house was split into an upper space where me and 2 other girls lived, and a lower space where 2 guys lived. In the summer, my mom and grandma came to help me move in my stuff into the house, and the guys below me came up to introduce themselves. One of them was very nice and offered for us to use their Wi-Fi until we got our own. I could tell from the get-go the other guy was socially awkward. I don't know if he had any disorders like autism. I learned he was not a student, but just living near the college for some reason. Once I moved most of my stuff into the house, I went back to my hometown with my mom and grandma until the semester started. 2 days into the fall semester, I was at work while my roommates were at home. The socially awkward kid knocked on our door and asked if he could do a load of laundry at our place since his washer wasn't working. My roommates were reluctant to let him in, but eventually agreed while being cautious. My roommate told him that once he put his stuff in the wash, he could go home and she would come get him when it was done. He left and came back about 20 minutes later, when the wash normally takes about 40 minutes, and basically let himself into the house when she opened the door. Both of my roommates were slightly nervous at this point and sat in the living room with him while they waited for his clothes to be done. This is where it gets weird. At first, they were having normal conversation, but then he started asking about their schedules. Like, do you work? When are your classes? Do you like to work out? When would you usually go to work out? My roommates gave short, non-detailed answers or tried to change the conversation. His wash finally finished, and since my roommates were freaked out, they told him they had to go to their sorority chapter and that he could let himself out after he gets his laundry. The girls go upstairs to their rooms to grab their belongings and came back out to the hallway to see him upstairs, trying to open a spare bedroom door that was locked. My roommate screamed and he runs out of the house. My roommates immediately went to the police station, and they couldn't really do anything since they had let him in the house. They said he was probably trying to steal from us, but we had very minimal things in the house, since we all had just moved in. We didn't even have a TV at that point. We never spoke to him again after that, but we would often see him lingering around, walking around the house, sitting by himself, staring off into the distance, just doing really off-putting stuff. Like he would literally stare at nothing for a good hour. It was the weirdest shit. I don't know what his intentions were, but it scared the shit out of us for sure. Oh, and by the way, my phone had died while I was at work, so I came home to my roommates gone and didn't realize what had happened until my phone was charged. This happened a couple days ago. I just remembered I'm in this sub and figured y'all would like to hear this. For reference, I am 25 female, with a pretty small stature. This happened outside the grocery store by my house, around 4 to 5 p.m. It's like a 5-minute walk, and I go to this plaza all the time. I've had occasionally sketchy encounters in my city, but it's typically a populated area, and I usually feel safe. I was crossing the grocery store parking lot and had my headphones in. I walked past a car with headlights on. My gut feeling, internal voice told me to pay more attention to my surroundings. I took out one of my earbuds and reached the sidewalk. Not 30 seconds later, as I was walking past a vacant building and out of the parking lot, I noticed a guy in a black hoodie leaning against the wall, kinda hiding behind the corner. I don't know why, but I just became hyper-vigilant in that moment. I took both earbuds out now and picked up my pace towards the main road so I could cross. I glanced behind my shoulder and my stomach dropped when I saw the guy in the black hoodie and another guy as well, both heading my direction. Keep in mind, this was a sort of a rush hour, and there was a decent amount of traffic, and people at the grocery store and nearby gas station but nobody was in the immediate vicinity. I jaywalked to the median in the main road, 'cause I wasn't about to waste time at the crosswalk. I was standing on the median waiting for the next lane of traffic to come to a full stop. And when I looked behind me again, they were also crossing the road directly behind me. I said fuck it, and weaved through traffic to get across quickly. Once I got across, I started walking as fast as I could, without looking like I was running. My backpack was full of liquid detergent, so it was heavy and I felt myself starting to panic. I approached a vacant church parking lot, not even 2 minutes from my house. And when I looked behind me, they were still following rather quickly. I picked up my phone and started a phone call to my roommate and started talking loudly before she even picked up. "Hey, I'm coming home now. Yeah, I'm in the church parking lot." As soon as she picked up, I lowered my volume and quickly told her what was happening and where I was. I was so close to home, but didn't want to lead them there. When I looked behind me again, thankfully, they had turned the other direction. I noticed they were heading behind the church, which is just a fenced-in dead end. I highly doubt that it was their intended destination, and I know I only shook them by performing the loud phone call. My roommate stayed on the phone with me as soon as I was out of their line of vision. I took off running, and the whole way home, I didn't see another sign of them. Granted, I also haven't left my house since then. I told one of my other roommates about it, and he said, "They're probably just homeless guys trying to ask you for a cigarette." Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, I just ordered new pepper spray, and have been reminded once again to always stay vigilant in public. Thanks for reading. I like to start off by saying I have a monotonous life. I spend my time playing Counter-Strike and working in a factory. I'm happy so it doesn't really bother me, but my new friend has made me realize how much I appreciate being solitary to an extent. It started off as a normal day, but I just felt as if I needed some fresh air, so I walked to the shop. On the way, I was faced with another man walking in the same direction. He starts his conversation by saying, "Howdy, neighbor." This is only odd because I live in the UK, and when we face other people out in the world, we normally just scrunch our lips and nod. Back to the point. I reply, "Oakley dokley, how about you?" And he starts rambling on about his day. I just zone out, but he said something that caught my attention. He noted that, "You should get ready for the New World Order." I responded by saying, "Already ahead, mate." And he proceeded to tell me he was a whole load of harmful chemicals and weapons hidden in various different locations. Absolutely not a normal human, but I was fascinated as to what he meant by the New World Order. At this point, we both walk into the shop. I get my stuff and pay, but he's in front of me and he buys a full plastic bag full of beans, peas, and all-day breakfast tins. As I'm walking out, I've noticed he's waited for me, and I ask, "What's the New World Order?" And what he told me was absolutely crazy, but it made sense. He told me about how all these celebrities are just puppets, and they're controlled by elites through means of blackmail. He thinks celebrities are forced to do imitations to become the top celebs, as in having sex with minors, murder, and so forth. He also elaborated how Epstein was a person behind recording the celebs for blackmail. At this point, I've been walking for a good 15 minutes, and I'm close to my house, and he's still with me. I'm getting nervous, but I don't say anything. Then he goes on and tells me the news is to brainwash people, and how it's just to create fear in the community. He told me we're all going to end up with chips that are electronic and are the mark of the beast in his words. The chip will contain currency, therefore turning everyone into slaves. He then says the rest of the U.S., emphasis on the U.S., will all meet up and we will be the survivors. He then said, "Right, I'm headed this way," and walked the long way home in order to not show this freak the way I walk home. and he said, "All right, it was nice chatting. I'll see you tomorrow." What the fuck? I wasn't sure where to post this. I'm pretty new to Reddit and I already put this in Let's Not Meet. But after digging around, it may better belong here instead. So this is hardly as terrifying as some of the stories I've read on here, and I apologize if it's anticlimactic. But it's been on my mind lately, even though it happened years ago when I was 18. I told my friends who found it hilarious, but I just thought it highlighted how raising young girls to always be unflattering, compliment, and polite to their elders isn't necessarily always a good thing. I'm a woman in my mid-20s now, living on a farm in rural England. I like to go jogging around the local area, especially along a nice 5-kilometer stretch of canal. This was the only time I have ever had a creepy experience, and thankfully, or perhaps foolishly, I didn't deter from running my favorite route after the incident. Perhaps I should also preface this by saying that I have like 0 street smarts. None. Zilch. I've lived in the countryside my entire life, and while it has its own dangers and shortcomings, the worst I've really had to deal with are people trespassing on the farm, who are terribly British and usually move along without too much fuss, everyone, including myself, apologizing for being an inconvenience. So far, I think I've been extremely lucky that I haven't encountered anyone especially nasty to touch wood. Anyway, before I go off on a tangent, I really think it was raining on this particular day because I was really struggling not to slip in the mud and go straight into the canal. I must have been about 30 minutes into the run when I noticed a man fishing up ahead. Now, I've always loved fishing, and as I was jogging past him, his head snapped up. I assumed because he didn't hear me approaching on the account of the rain, and I shot him a smile and a wave, and I usually do to the people who I pass by on a run. I didn't really notice anything weird about him. He was just some old gentleman in a green raincoat, looking startled by a jogger. Anyway, literally a second later, I tripped over his spare rod, not an emphasis, I promise. It was just laying in the grass, and I wasn't watching my feet, for I slipped for a split second, but luckily I didn't fall flat on my face, just stumbled a bit. I can't remember what he said that got me to stop, but it was something like, "Whoa, are you alright?" Maybe it's testament to how unfit I was at the time, but it actually welcomed the excuse to stop and catch my breath. So I turned around and said, "Oh God, don't worry, I'm fine. Just clumsy." Okay, writing this out, I'm starting to see how there were about 1,000 things I could have done to avoid the situation. I think I opened a window to conversation by asking him what he's catching, if he's having a successful day, enjoying the weather, etc. We got to talking and he was pretty pleasant, mentioning how he was retired, fishing was his hobby, and this was his first time in the area. I did notice that every now and again his eyes kept wandering down to my legs, but frankly, if I'm talking to someone, my gaze often flits around without me realizing I'm doing it, so I think not too much of it. Then he started to tell me about how his wife had left him, and out of the blue statement, I mean, we were literally just talking about how annoying crayfish can be for fishermen, but never mind. I offered my condolences, and he presses on about how his kids don't ever see him. He's lonely and doesn't have a lot of joy in his life. He sort of pauses at this point and asked if I have a partner. I honest to God said no, and make a joke about reeling one in someday. He doesn't laugh. I have to be real with you guys. I didn't see a thing wrong with his odd line of questioning. No red flags popped up at all. In hindsight, really is a wonderful thing, I suppose. The old man does that thing where he starts listing off reasons why I should have a boyfriend. Any man would be lucky to have me, blah blah blah. I'm so nice and articulate. How am I single? At long last, I falter. But I think it had more to do with the fact that I've always been awful at receiving compliments gracefully. I just go a bit shy and start to make jokes. So I said I'm most likely still single because I'm a terrible cook. And he immediately counters with a, "I happened to be a chef when I was a young man." We'd be the perfect couple. Ah, I thought. He then offered me some sweet corn he cooked himself. The same sweet corn I've been watching him use as bait for the last 10 minutes. At this point, he had me on the retreat. I wasn't scared of him, just a bit put out that a seamlessly harmless conversation had taken such an unwanted turn. So thank God I actually had some semblance of a brain in there. I declined the offer for the waterlogged sweet corn bait and mentioned that I was expected home soon for lunch. He asked if I lived in the village up the road. Duh, it's the only damn village for miles. What could I say but yes? I waved and said goodbye. But before I could leave, he reaches out and takes my hand, saying, "Before you go, you've been so kind stopping to chat with me. Not everyone would do that. Would you mind if I asked for a kiss before you leave?" And damn me. By the way, this is the part of the story where my poor, suffering mother buries her face in her hands and asks me what in the world went through my tiny brain at that moment. I say, okay, I didn't want to. I didn't like questions. But the way I figured, we always kiss our elderly relatives on the cheek, either as a hello or goodbye. I thought he meant just that, a kiss in the parting. Not an altogether weird thing to do in the UK. Immediately odd to do with a perfect stranger, but I was always raised to be as accommodating as possible. I wouldn't say boo to a goose because if I ever raised my voice as a child, I was swiftly admonished for behaving so childishly. I love my parents deeply, unevocally, but I wished they taught me to say no a little more often, and more so to say no without feeling guilty, but about it afterwards. So he stands up and I lean around him, ready to press my cheek against his, and this old twat grabs my chin and jerks my face forward, so I literally crash into his face, and he sort of just sucks at my bottom lip for all of a second before I immediately lurch back and I stare at him like I didn't walk myself right into that one. On a side note, I noticed there was some white stuff gathered on the corner of his lips, and I couldn't help myself. I gagged rudely and loudly, but to be honest, I think it was justified. He actually looked offended at that, but I didn't stick around to ponder on that sort of hypocrisy. Stammering something about hoping he enjoys the rest of his day, I pelted along the canal. I heard him call out, "Where are you going?" as if my nasty retreat was a complete mystery to him. I go home and instantly told my mom, expecting her to laugh it off because what the hell, right? She was righteously furious and lectured me on how I should have just said no in the first place. I didn't feel like debating the irony of her telling me that. She then made me promise not to go running along the stretch of canal again. I kept that promise for about a week. I got good marks at school. Doesn't mean I'm smart. Luckily, I never see him again, and frankly, I hope I never will. So that's it. A disappointing end. And I apologize for that. But I've been meaning to write this down for a while now, and if nothing else, I hope it at least serves as a cautionary tale for people like me who might be reading this, who aren't too proud to admit that they'd have probably reacted in a similar way, because being seen as rude is apparently more mortifying than being taken advantage of. For goodness sake, if nobody else has told you this, because God knows nobody told me until much later in life, it is absolutely okay to say no to things that you really don't want to do.